Hello and welcome to the champion pool. In this bracket, or in this pool, we are actually taking a look at the top two competitors from each of the sub-pools. In particular, I want to give a shout out to 005 and GraffixJoka, who 005 seems as though his fleet was, or seems as though his ships were designed by someone who has competed before, but not in an NMSS tournament. GraffixJoka is first time NMSS competitor as well, but I suspect being a part of RogueDrones, he was able to absorb some wisdom in advance. But the rest of these are names that we've all seen before. But let's go ahead and get this going. Up first we have GraffixJoka up against 005. In their sub-pools, 005 won this one pretty handily. Not really expecting a whole lot different here. The ships from 005 are remarkably durable. Despite their... well, it's kind of in a weird spot. If they do take enough damage to break their shields, they kind of just implode. But doing enough damage to break their shields is a bit difficult. You can see GraffixJoka is actually doing very well this time, though. I don't know that he ever did this well in the sub-pool. And GraffixJoka took round one. And moving into round two, you can see 005 off to a strong start. The burst laser is rather good against all of these missiles, but for the mortar ship, for example, the burst laser is also the main tool it has in order to deal with GraffixJoka's fleet. And GraffixJoka's missile is doing a pretty good job of actually putting some damage on the board. This fight definitely did not feel like this in the first sub-pool. I have no idea. But such is the nature of RNG. Sometimes weird stuff happens. The real question is, are we the weird stuff, or are we seeing the weird stuff now, or did we see the weird stuff in the sub-pool? The world may never know. Have a good night, Flip. Thanks for joining us. And 005 takes round two. Going into round three. That round was a bit closer to what we saw in the sub-pool, where the mortar ship is just struggling because GraffixJoka's ships are just a bit too fast for it to deal with. But the missile ship managing to deal with the rest of the fleet. The bulk of the fleet being kept distracted by the mortar ship. 005 ships are very quick. Gives them a lot of freedom to move around the field. A big hit to that mortar ship, though. But I think it might be too little too late. With half of his fleet dead, I think 005's got this match in the bag. it is, 005 takes the match. So next up we have GraffixJoka up against Song Jiang. Not really sure how to read this one, to be honest, though. If they get too close to the plasma ships, GraffixJoka's fleet will not survive very long at all. But at the same time, they have no reason to get close. But that said, the AI does whatever it wants sometimes. And we can see Song Jiang putting up quite a few kills. Rather suddenly, too. The railguns, I think, may be playing some havoc with GraffixJoka's fleet, but it's hard to say for certain exactly. The AI behaves in strange ways at strange times. And Song Jiang takes round 1. Moving in round 2, we can see the very similar start. Song Jiang's ships are very durable and surprisingly nimble. Not as much as some of the other ships we've seen in the various pools, but more than abundantly fast. The white and gold color scheme also looks very nice, I think. And Song Jiang takes the match. So up next we have GraffixJoka up against Flypaste. I'm feeling pretty good about Flypaste's odds in this fight. His fleet, I think, will be vulnerable to long-term harassment, but the blast pulsars, I think, will last pretty well up against GraffixJoka's fleet. In the meantime, Flypaste's designs are very solid, and they've been holding up very well so far this tournament. The score is very even, though. I think Flypaste needed to score a few more early kills. I think he's going to succumb to the missile harassment at this point. Although, that said, Flypaste has managed to make a bit of a comeback and even build himself up a little bit of a score lead. I think it really just takes a few seconds of catching a ship up against the wall or something of that nature. The problem with kiting ships and mobility is that the ships are not aware of the boundary of the arena, so they'll sometimes go careening directly into it, and while that doesn't actually cause damage to the ship directly, it does kind of pin them against the wall so that they don't know where to go and what to do. They'll just sit there and try to drive into the wall if the enemy is approaching from straight on, which, of course, when your ship is not built to take damage, is typically pretty fatal. And here you can see Flypaste is about to take round 1. He somehow managed to score 16,000 points without actually killing all of the ships, which, that's interesting. And Flypaste off to an even stronger start this time than last round. I'm feeling like this one's pretty favorable for Flypaste. Showing that you don't have to evil stack in order to win. And with only one ship left and 30 seconds on the clock, I think we can pretty safely say Flypaste has this one in the bag. It's just a moment, or just a matter of time while we wait for ships to catch up. And Flypaste wins. So next up we have GraffixJoka up against Climhazzard. Climhazzard sweeped his bracket, if I remember right, going 5-0, which is very impressive. I don't think I actually had to do any tiebreakers this time. One fleet defeated everyone else in the pool, and one fleet clearly came in second on each of the pools, which is nice. I hate doing tiebreaker stuff. But that said, Climhazzard's off to a very strong lead, and it looks like it's only getting more and more favorable for him. Yeah, for the most part we've seen what all of these fleets can do. There's not really a whole lot more to add at this point. But we are getting to see a few new matchups, but most of the new matchups are still kind of similar to what we've already experienced. With Climhazzard's torpedo ships providing support fire while his super freighters distract all of the enemies. Same things that happened in his pool, but Climhazzard takes round one. And moving into round two. Round one was really the score differential was solid enough that I can't imagine Climhazzard will lose round two. And he's already up quite a bit on the scoreboard. Losing a few small ships, but small ships aren't that important. They're an insignificant portion of his budget. the bulk of the budget being the medium-sized ships and the next biggest contributor being those 2 freighters. I think the little guys are there just to eat up some extra points that were left over. Maybe keep some things distracted for a few moments. Not terribly important to the overall plan. And Climhazzard wins. So let's see. Yeah, GraffixJoka up against Husk. Not really sure how this is going to go. If GraffixJoka's ships keep the distance that they should, they'll have no problem, at the very least, winning on score. But we've seen before that they don't always keep their distance when they should. And I'm not exactly sure why, but they seem to be a bit better behaved this time around. And as long as they keep this up, I think GraffixJoka is going to have a colossal advantage. And with a few of GraffixJoka's ships getting pinched on the walls and whatnot, you can see that the score has not been a runaway victory, but GraffixJoka is very clearly in the lead. His ships are just able to pretty consistently apply damage all the time, and for the most part they're not taking all that much. It's just every once in a while the AI makes mistakes and the ship gets caught out somewhere. And yeah, Husk, unfortunately I think this fleet is just happens to have everything it needs to win. And round 1 goes to GraffixJoka. Round 2 will probably be much of the same. And with Husk actually taking the lead now for the first time in these matches. Managed to catch out a few ships. Can it ride this lead to round 3? Yes, it can. So here we go, the beginning of round 3. As we've seen before, GraffixJoka will build up a point lead, but it can turn south very quickly. The Sentinel ships are very good at resisting missile damage. It is still armor, so it does still give up points pretty steadily, but the missile launchers themselves are not a very efficient damage source. They're pretty reliable because the missiles track, and unless your opponent's moving very quickly, you generally hit something. But they're not very efficient as far as damage output relative to their cost. Which can lead to situations like this where you got ships just shooting each other for a while one team slowly tries to approach and the other one tries to kite. It makes matches hinge on one or two lucky or unlucky moments when ships get caught where they shouldn't be. But next up we have GraffixJoka up against Jokrates. Now Jokrates' fleet is a bit faster, and so it should be able to try and catch up, but at the same time it's significantly more fragile than we saw with Husk. Yeah, we're seeing a lot more explosions on both sides of the field. Hey Splinter, you're just in time for a good chunk of the champion pool. But it's looking fairly much like Jokrates has this one in the bag. He's got pretty good point lead, pretty good ship lead. And even though half the clock is still up there, I feel like we're going to see GraffixJoka's fleet start to dwindle in number very soon. And Jokrates takes round 1. And you can see the aggression and speed of the fleet from Jokrates coming in very handy in these fights. While these things were able to outmaneuver the spinners that we saw before, and I think they were able to outmaneuver a few things in their own subpool, they are unable to escape Jokrates' fleet. But at the same time, I feel like Jokrates' fleet would be a little less prepared for a brawling match. So there is that. And much like last round, you see Jokrates has built up a bit of a lead for himself. And yeah, I know that feeling, Splinter. Some days when your eyes are just too heavy. And Jokrates wins the match. So next up we have GraffixJoka up against the Dark Lord of the Abyss. And you can see, do we have any laser torpedoes on the field yet? Yep, we certainly do. As GraffixJoka starts hemorrhaging ships rather quickly. Yeah, some days your eyes are just a bit too heavy. And Splinter takes round 1. I swear, Splinter, if you ring out in this tournament, I'm going to be very disappointed in you. And Herald of Dawn wins round 2. So next up we have 005 against Song Jiang. Our Chinese competitors going head to head. I don't know how much rivalry there is in the Chinese speaking community, but I do think it would be interesting if these two knew each other and had some sort of friendly or even hostile rivalry going on. Yeah, that was a pretty brutal takedown. And Song Jiang takes the match. Very well fought. But up next we have 005 up against Flypaste. The mortar ship from 005 doing quite a bit of early damage. Just showed up and gutted one of Flypaste's ships before rolling out. I think the speed on these things is really what's most impressive. He invested a lot in thrusters. I mean watching in real time, but also seeing spoilers. And 005 taking a very big point lead in the first round. Flypaste might be able to turn it around, but generally when we see a point difference this big, it's here to stay. See, now this is just harsh and unusual. Getting right up on a ship like that. Flypaste having a much better second round, but between the two ships, the mortar ship has so far generally been the easier one to kill. But if it crashes into the wall like that too many times, it's not going to have much left. And Flypaste takes round 2. Just showing that this one is still very much anyone's game. The real key is how much damage that mortar ship is able to do before it gets destroyed, I think. The full volleys of mortars are able to do too much damage to Flypaste's ships too quickly. And with the mortar ship down, this looks very similar to the last game. Flypaste might just pull this match off. And I guess AI is trying to take advantage of the blast pulsars and their ability to do a remarkable amount of damage to ships once they close in. Just needs to hold out 30 more seconds. This missile ship is proving to be quite the problem though. And Flypaste takes the match. So next up we have 005 up against Climhazzard. Those torpedoes from Climhazzard seem to be doing their job pretty effectively, as you can see them whittling away at the mortar ship. And an excellent showing from Climhazzard in this first round as well. Having killed the mortar ship, he's still stuck having to chase the missile ship, but the torpedoes, when they connect, are doing an excellent job. It's just a matter of whether or not he can get enough of them, I suppose. And there you can see some more chunks being taken out of 005's missile ship. And yeah, they are using basically all of their shields. The core itself is actually not covered by any of the shields. It's in a dead zone right in the middle of them. You're talking about Clims? Yeah. Clims also use all of the shield too, which I can appreciate. And Climhazzard takes round one. This time, however, the mortar ship seems to be surviving considerably longer, and with that, getting a bunch more time to do its damage. The volleys from the mortar ship are enough to completely overwhelm a shield and basically kill the ship instantly. And the missile ship being even more brutal. The missile ship from 005 is actually quite the monster. I think unfortunately for Climhazzard in this round, his super freighters didn't get the enemy's attention, and as a result, the ships from 005 were free to go around and mess up Climhazzard's fleet. The only things left at this point are those two super freighters, which are fighting side by side, and it's a pretty good way of getting the AI to freak out, but it isn't really that advantageous a situation. And round 2 goes to 005. So as is often the case against 005, Climhazzard's success or defeat hinges on whether or not it can quickly kill the mortar ship. Oh, is it? Yeah, I don't know. I speak 0 Chinese dialects. Although I'm not afraid of bad words either. As long as I think as long as it's not a racial or sexist epithet, I think I can get right. I think I can get away with it. The missile ships seem to have been distracted fighting the freighter, but now the medium ships are charging it like idiots instead of letting it continue to be distracted. It did let you kill the mortar ship, but now 30 seconds in, I don't know if it's going to be recoverable. The missile ship is very wily. And 005 takes the match. So next up we have Husk. I'm not entirely sure Husk is going to be able to deal with that missile ship at all. He might be able to get the mortar ship because the mortar ship has to close into range, or melee spikes are going to take out the missile ship entirely. With the missile ship down, I'm feeling a lot better about Husk's odds. Especially since it wants to sit there and chase the little tiny melee rushers and still lose like half of its ship to them. With that said, you can see the devastation wrought by all those mortars. Though unless that mortar ship figures something out, this one is as good as Husk's round. With a little luck, the missile ship will fall for the, or well, on Husk's behalf, since he's in chat with us. I have to cheer for him, right? But who knows? Perhaps one or both ships will fall for some melee spike traps. All the missiles just not connecting. Too many burst lasers. Yeah, tank Husk is Husk. Same person. Yeah, I feel like if the missile ship... Honestly, if it had been the mortar ship instead of the missile ship, the round might still be in jeopardy. I don't know that the mortar ship really pulls its weight in 005's fleet. I feel like it seems to be a bit more of a liability than anything else. It sometimes will snipe a ship, or sometimes even 2 or 3, but most of the time it's the missile ship that's been carrying 005's fleet to victory. And yeah, the triangle, or the gray, or the melee spikes for Husk are gray. They're actually on the back of the blade on the bigger ship, and the front of the blade on the smaller ship. Yeah, the mortar volleys do look awesome, don't get me wrong. But, function before form. Very close on the scoreboard though, even with the missile ship alive. Less than a minute left, and 005 only just took the lead. And with a pretty narrow lead, it's actually looking like 005 will be taking round 2. Very strong showing from all competitors, as mentioned in the chat. Still a decent point lead though in favor of Husk. Don't know if I'll be able to hold on to it for another minute and some odd though. It's a long time. The lead having bled down to only a 400-point gap and 30 seconds on the clock. This one's coming down to the wire. And that's it. Husk wins the match. There is no way that motor ship's going to be able to make up that difference. Missile ship decided to suicide itself, and it didn't exactly go well for the missile ship. So congratulations to us. This was one hard-fought match. So next up we have 005 up against Jokrates. Jokrates is a bit more speedy and aggressive than most, but I feel like he's also going to be a good bit more vulnerable to that mortar bombardment. I'm not entirely sure how this will go. I get the feeling Jokrates might still win, but at the same time, I don't know. The fleet from 005 is still faster than Jokrates. Yeah, Splinter, Duke didn't make it because you knocked Duke out in the sub-pool. How does that make you feel, you monster? There were little torpedo satellites with manipulators and a burst laser. Little 500p things with 3 or 4 torpedoes on them. They had this problem where they like to get way too close to their targets all the time, and they died a lot because of it. And Jokrates takes down takes down the missile ship. So it's off to a pretty good start. Although the mortar ship, which hasn't really been pulling its weight in most of these fights, I think is going to give Jokrates a bit more problems. Mainly because I think all of his ships are vulnerable to the missile splash rate or the mortar splash radius. Although if they keep to cannon range instead of trying to ram, which they seem to be doing, they'll probably handle it pretty alright. Mortars are a very short-range weapon. And Jokrates wins round 1. The TKO. Yeah, I've always considered mortars kind of a niche weapon. They're fairly good in a few situations, but to commit this heavily, I feel like it is a bit of a liability. I feel like 005's fleet would have been better overall if instead of the mortar ship, he just had a second missile ship. And The Sentinels are pretty strong, but the mortar ship is having a problem even popping the internals despite hitting the entire ship in the splash radius. Although that said, it does look like 005 is going to take this round. Unless something crazy happens here very soon. Ooh. Jokrates managed to take out the missile ship. And now the mortar ship actually kind of earning its place, doing exactly what I've been expecting it to do. The splash radius is big enough to basically affect the entire ship, so I think it's 4 mortars would kill the core outright. But 005 takes round 2. Going into round 3 with either fleet poised to take it pretty effectively. And with 1 kill, Jokrates taking a pretty solid point lead. And there's the match. And next up we have 005 against the monster that lives under your bed. With a missile barrage completely destroying one of the DayWakers. But these really nimble ships from 005 are no match for laser torpedoes. Yep, I definitely misread DayWakers, but if you're cool with calling them Daywalkers, I'm down for that too. And Splinter wins. So next up we have Song Jiang up against Flypaste. I don't remember how this match went in their sub-pool. I'm at a bit of a loss. Very close though, on the scoreboard at least. Could very much see this one going either way. But yeah, I should have remembered this but I do not. I do not. Yeah, this fight kind of reminds me of that one boxing match with Don Fry, where the two guys just grab each other by the back of the neck and just punch each other's face. Yeah, I wanted to say I think Flypaste won before, but I don't remember at all. Dun, 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 dun. You know, inspirational music for the face punching. Yeah, I have no idea what that other guy's name is, so I didn't even try. But yeah, that's the one I'm talking about. Don Fry with his big ass Tom Selleck mustache. A pretty narrow lead, at least on score, in favor of Flypaste, but looking at the ship count, I'm inclined to believe that with another 30 seconds, Flypaste would have won by kills. Very solid display, and kind of reinforces the idea that Flypaste did win this in the sub pool. But I don't remember, because my memory is atrocious. That's why I write everything down. But Song Jiang off to a very strong start here in round 2. I do prefer when the ship kind of staggers its fire instead of firing in volleys with things like plasma cannons. I wish ripple fire actually worked with the AI and didn't end up nerfing your ship if you had too many cannons. Yeah, the not remembering anything is an especially big problem when you, say, are told something at work, and then you have to ask them to send it to you in an email so that you can remember it. Bosses don't like that a whole lot. But, what can you do? Ooh, Flypaste snagging a pretty solid kill on the right side of the map, but I think he's a little bit too far behind this round. I think Song Jiang's going to take this round. I think those are flat cannons on that little guy. Just getting ready to say, every fleet's gotta have a hero. And Song Jiang takes round 2. So, let's see how this round 3 goes. I don't even know what you're talking about, Splinter. Sorry. The joke earlier is that it wasn't Chinese he was speaking, that it was German. That's about as far as I got with it. Yeah, this is not a promising looking round for Flypaste. Oh, the two types of ships? I think he actually has 4 in his fleet. There's this little guy here with the missiles. There's this guy here with the flak. There's this guy here with the railguns. And this guy here with the it's another railgun. And this guy here with the plasmas. Press F to pay respects for Flypaste fleet. That's alright, Splinter. Something tells me you're going to avenge his fleet. And Song Jiang takes it. So next up we have Song Jiang up against Climhazzard. It should be a pretty fighty match. It's unfortunate for Climhazzard that those medium ships got sandwiched between the freighter and the hostile fleet. That said, the freighters are now doing their job. Being all in the way and getting shot. The one freighter is getting cut up by the plasma ship, though. Looking very, very solid for Climhazzard in the first round. The freighters managed to take the brunt of the enemy offense, which is exactly what Climhazzard wanted, and gave the medium ships plenty of time to dump torpedoes into things, which is exactly what Climhazzard wanted. What, you mean people don't like losing to ships that are just squares with 1,000,000 guns in them? That seems weird. And Climhazzard tanks round 1. Yeah, I think if I were to design these, I would move that, I think I would move that core up in front of the generator and move the generator a few squares back. It's got plenty of damage resistance in the front, but having the core so far back seems a little vulnerable. Especially since they seem to get shot from the back pretty often. But one of the freighters is down. And not that many of Song Jiang's ships taken in exchange. That's right. My waiting on Deluxe to have another tournament so that I can enter my newest fleet. Been tinkering with that off and on, and I'm feeling pretty solid about it. Yeah, well, the containers line up, but there's two rectangles on either side. It's actually the same thing that people do with the plasma cannons to get them to fit in squares too, except instead of a plasma cannon, it's a container. At least that's kind of the idea behind it. Boom! And Climhazzard takes the match. Very strong showing by Climhazzard this tournament. No, Song Jiang up against Husk. Another round of Mike Tyson's punch in the face. And you can see the power of the Sentinel cannon. Breaking ships apart. I do really like that because the spinners for Husk are slowly retreating. If the enemy chases too hard, they end up cutting their own nose off on its melee spikes. Punishment for your hubris. I also really like that the bolts coming out of the guns on Husk ships are gray, but the missiles are red. It looks pretty cool. I'm a fan. Husk made a very neat looking fleet that also happens to be really good at killing stuff. I think that's an endeavor we can all get behind. And it's looking like Husk got round one very confidently. So, wouldn't be surprised if he took round two as well. Although the champion pool has been the pool of the 3-round match. Which is always nice, I think. It makes the fights take longer, obviously, but I feel like it's easier to get invested in the fight itself when you know for certain that either fleet could win. And another very solid lead. Looks like Husk will be taking the match too. Sentinel Brawlers are utterly terrifying. As for weapons to put on tanks, if you're looking for more short range, plasma cannons are a pretty obvious answer. You've got the autocannon is really solid. The missiles are also really good. If you really want to see a tank that's really annoying to deal with, see if you can get Splinter to give you his fleet Strike Force Vesuvius and actually fight just the Vesuvius. That thing is a real pain in the ass. It's a bit outside the normal ship budget for most tournaments, at least the ones that I host, but it certainly is a very annoying fleet. And now we have Jokrates up against Song Jiang. I'm feeling like this is going to go in Jokrates' flavor too, or in Jokrates' favor. Between the melee spikes, the sentinel guns, Song Jiang doesn't have a whole lot of splash damage, so the hyperstacked and compression of the armor on Jokrates' ships isn't going to be a big factor. And Jokrates takes the match. So next up we have Song Jiang up against literally Hitler. And let's see, as usual, putting up some free points for his enemy. But now we've got the laser torpedoes to deal with. And yeah, I've been using a different term every time for you, Splinter, 'cause I want you to know. Laser torpedoes. No survivors except for all survivors. I like the across-the-map laser torpedoes. I think those are my favorite. And Splinter takes the match. So up next we have Flypaste up against Climhazzard. I think Climhazzard was saying he was looking forward to this fight. Mostly because this was just going to be a pretty brutal brawl. At the very least, though, round one seems to be going very much in favor of Climhazzard. The performance of his fleet is overall just doing very well this tournament. The torpedo ships earning their keep, the super freighters earning their keep, the distractors filling in a gap. And for bonus points, I don't think Climhazzard... Yeah, Climhazzard's not even using module stacking at all. Whereas Flypaste, as I recall, is with some of his stuff. Sit still, so I can zoom in on you. Eh. All the metas fighting each other. Yeah, well, I mean, Flypaste defeated the cameraman, so I guess there's that. Small victories, right? No, I'm not doing that. They are not going to be tracked by me. If the game wants to give it a go, I will happily allow it, but I will not be trying to track a DayWaker myself. That's just not happening, no. You monster. And Climhazzard taking another strong lead. The freighters do seem to be creating some problems for some of Flypaste's fleet, but the bulk of his fleet doesn't seem to be all that distracted by them. They're just getting torpedoed because torpedoes. Yeah, this has been going on for almost 7 hours now. It's a long tournament. But we are wrapping up sometime soon. Ooh, 100-foot Lego is good. But I already had an idea for what I'm going to call it next. So, less than a minute. It's looking like we can pretty safely say that Climhazzard is going to end up winning this round. He's got that competitor's high going, and Climhazzard takes the match. So up next we have Flypaste up against Husk. I'm not really sure how this one will go. Flypaste's fleet does, it is somewhat oriented toward brawling, but it's also taken the time to not brawl and sit back at a distance on more than a few occasions. But I feel like Husk has some pretty big advantages here. That said, the scoreboard is pretty even. Husk has lost a lot of ships, but it's all mostly just those little melee guys. I think all of his spinners, all of his spinners are still alive. So it still very much could go either way. In a minute 30 to score 1,500 points for these two fleets is not much. I think Flypaste's fleet on average does have more range and more mobility, but for some reason a lot of the time it seems to like being inside of the Sentinel cannon range, which I wouldn't advise to anything other than Sentinels. Mostly on account of the Sentinel cannons. But that said, the point gap is staying pretty consistent. Although the last few seconds, Flypaste is trying to make a comeback. He's got some of his ships ganging up pretty effectively, using the just few hundred points of extra range. Although sometimes they take like a full barrage right to the face, which and Husk takes round one. Flypaste off to a bit of a stronger start. He actually managed to kill, I think, all of the melee ships and hasn't lost anything yet. Although that said, some of his ships are still being far braver than they need to be. I'm going to go ahead and chalk that up to next level AI strategies. But it did manage to get out alive, so I suppose one cannot complain too much. And this time, it appears Flypaste is going to be the one holding the point advantage. The longer the point advantage actually goes in favor of Flypaste, I think the better off he is, with Husk's fleet pretty steadily taking damage. Flypaste's fleet theoretically could be disengaging from combat, recovering, and then coming back in. Although, as we saw a few moments ago, a couple of Flypaste's ships got a little too brave, got destroyed, and now the score has flipped the other direction. Less than 50 points apart for a moment there, but Flypaste is shooting ahead in the last few seconds. Or by Flypaste I mean Husk. And then Flypaste again. I don't even know. These two trade which one is ahead more often than stocks. It's pretty ridiculous. But it does make for a last minute nail biter, if you're into that kind of thing. The last round here, starting off a bit similar to the one before it, with Flypaste taking a pretty strong initial advantage, and then a ship suiciding, and that advantage immediately going to Husk. Because that's how the bravery do. Now we can see even halfway through there's less than 300 points difference between them. A hell of a match. Although I can't help but wonder if there are some pilots making poor choices to blame. I think it actually has something to do with the fact that Husk has missiles on all of his ships. So when Flypaste ships are making their decision about the range that they should be engaging, they're accounting for the fact that the enemy has missiles and can still hit them. And so they choose to move into a range where they can do more damage rather than a range where they can avoid taking damage. Something to that effect. At least that's my guess. I can't be quite certain. To my knowledge, the only person who's ever actually seen the AI, the code for the AI, is the developer, and he hasn't been too forthcoming with the specifics. But it does appear that Flypaste will be taking the match with about a 500-point lead in the third round. Well done, well done. Very close encounter. Here, however, I'm feeling a bit more in favor of Jokrates' fleet. Jokrates' fleet has generally done very well against everything that's done well against Husk. Largely because Jokrates still has all the cannons, but a lot more hard engage. Whereas Husk's ships just kind of lumber toward their enemy. Jokrates' ships are much more nimble and aggressive. And you can see on the scoreboard that it is not going so well, at least in the first round, for Flypaste. Though per his own admission, Flypaste has a hard time admitting that other factions exist. So I don't know that he tested against Sentinel at all. That might explain a lot, actually, if aliens gave us the source code. Because, hey, this keep these idiots busy for years. Look at the silly humans trying to pretend they know spaceships. But a very strong victory for round one for Jokrates. And with round two off to a fairly strong start for Jokrates too. Not looking too promising for Flypaste. And Jokrates takes the match. And next up we have Flypaste up against Mr. or Dr. Jekyll, if Dr. Jekyll was also Mr. Hyde. Yeah, I think there was only one tank roll, and he didn't quite make the champion pool. And Splinter takes the match. So next up we have Climhazzard up against Husk. These two have been brawling it out with just about everybody. And if I remember right, in the sub-pools, I think Climhazzard won? I'm not entirely sure. I've largely forgotten at this point. But we do get to see them again. With all the little, that's different. I think some physics shenanigans happened there. Sent one of Husk's ships sailing. I'll have to go and watch that in the replay and see what happened. Yeah, Husk made a delayed spinner, just a different kind. A pretty strong lead being taken by Climhazzard, though. His torpedo ship's doing a pretty good job against Husk's heavily armored but slow-moving spinners. Wasn't Husk in school or something? I don't even know. School or work or whatever it is people do these days, I don't even know. And round one going very favorably for Climhazzard. This torpedo-laden dog pile over here on the left is slowly grinding along. There was no Starfix entry. And yeah, I don't remember seeing Dukes, rammers. And Climhazzard takes round 1. So moving into round 2. The round 1 was very, very in control by Climhazzard basically the entire time. I wouldn't be too surprised if round 2 went basically the same. And you can see the freighters moving to position. And the barrage of torpedoes beginning. And Climhazzard beginning a pretty strong point lead rather early. But we've got things like this spinner here has an abundance of cannons, but instead of using the cannons is just sitting back and using its missiles. I don't think that's helping them a whole lot. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is why we don't let our pilots drink and fly. And like this, the mines are expiring, so they're all just kind of detonating. Looks pretty neat. Almost like stars winking out of existence. And I think we can say at this point that Climhazzard's going to be taking the match. Welcome back, Husk, and yeah, unfortunately, Climhazzard's been giving you the business. But next up we have Climhazzard up against Jokrates. Jokrates has been a problem for a lot of fleets this tournament. He's fast and aggressive, and he's got the good cannons, he's got the melee spikes, got the good armor. Just all around being a problem for people. But that said, Climhazzard does seem to be holding on fairly well. Yeah, I think Climhazzard might have been. Let me check. But either way, we had 7 people who were competing for the first time. So the neophyte pool was full. Yeah, this was Floof's second tourney, Husk's second tourney, Climhazzard's second. It was also Finn's second. S&W was in the 4th pool, I think. Yeah, Jokrates and you both beat him, I believe. Let me double check, so I know whether or not I'm lying. Yeah, S&W was in the 4th pool, got beat by Jokrates and Splinter. I think you won all of his other matches, maybe, but you only need to lose 2. It was basically hard counter, but modified for the lack of asteroid thrusters. So it had this big plasma spinner was more spacious and less dense. Yeah, you had proton torp ships, that sort of thing. It wasn't a bad fleet by any stretch, but one person's basically cheating. And round 1 goes to Climhazzard. Waste was also in 4th pool. I mean, you can't really laser a laser torp. It's not how physics works. But no, basically the torpedoes just approach so fast the point defense couldn't even deal with it. Does look like this round is going to go to Jokrates though. Pretty solid point lead. It's got a bunch of ships moving across the field to act as reinforcements. It certainly does appear that Jokrates is bringing the violence. Yeah, Duke's bullet series was pretty solid. And Jokrates takes round 2. So now we have the beloved third round, where anything can happen, including a ship driving right through a freighter. I mean, did you see how close that was? Just a few blocks over. But now there's cannons and freighter down. Oh, and while I was looking at the one freighter, I guess they sliced up the other. Bye-bye, freighters. Like I said, Jokrates' fleet has been a problem for most of the competitors in this tournament so far. They've been kicking the hell out of everything. And now we have Climhazzard against the monster the boogeyman threatens his children with. With Climhazzard taking a pretty big point lead earlier, but that's what we've seen every time. And then the laser torpedoes start happening. And you can see Climhazzard bleeding off all of his smaller ships very quickly. And now his kiters completely unable to maneuver around the laser torpedoes. And with only the two freighters left, and probably not long for this world, I think we can probably say that Splinter's going to end up taking round 1. And Splinter takes round 1. And now we have Husk up against Jokrates. I don't believe these two have met yet, but they are very similar. I think the advantage actually goes to Husk though, because they both kind of rely on the same tactic, but Husk is tougher. Although that said, Jokrates' fleet has been performing very well so far this tournament. But you can see a narrow point lead beginning to form in favor of Husk. And by narrow, I mean pretty expediently widening. Or maybe not. I don't know. Their scores aren't getting too far apart. They're both very similar fleet designs in concept. They're just Husk chose to be slower and heavier, while Jokrates was faster, which made him really good at engaging things that tried to run away. But now that they're kind of forced to fight within each other's range, the slower and heavier fleet seems to have an advantage, which is the way of things. And Husk takes round 1 with a pretty solid lead. I imagine this one's going to go very similar. The specifics might change a bit, but I think the recipe is going to be about the same. Although a decent hit from one of Jokrates' ships takes out one of the arms on the smaller ship, or one of the smaller spinners for Husk. Although it appears it's not going to end up being too bad. And an even bigger lead forming than the last matchup in favor of Husk. Being the heavy brawler is typically pretty advantageous. Well, in that case, Husk, welcome back. Your fleet is putting bullets in people. Space Hass is the only Hass. You heard it here first, ladies and gentlemen. And Husk takes the match. So next up we have Husk against that thing. Ugh. Let that out of its cage anyway. I think we're going to be here for a moment while we wait for Splinter's fleet to finally put enough torpedoes in the target. across the map laser torps. And with round 1 going to Splinter, I can't imagine that round 2 is going to go a whole lot different. These things have been pretty extreme. Some kind of whooshing noise. Yeah, my head itched, so I did mute the mic for a second so I could scratch. Otherwise it makes a hellacious ruckus. That might have been what you heard. Either that or whatever foul entity you made your pact with has shown up to collect its payment. I mean, you did create the Herald of Dawn. It would only make sense that you saw sunlight now. Look at all those torpedoes. And Splinter wins the match. So last up we have Jokrates against the one that would be Agent Smith if Agent Smith were somehow an even bigger asshole. I like that they shot at one of the DayWakers, and it was just like, no, and just like moved 2 inches, and all the shots missed. Yeah, it turns out playing video games doesn't actually teach you martial arts. Who knew? Who knew? Always did kind of bother me about the Matrix. They're fighting agents who functionally bend the laws of reality, And their choice of mode of combat is hand to hand. That's not... that doesn't seem very well thought out. But anyway, that should be 7 wins for Splinter, which makes Splinter the champion, and also kind of a prick. But congratulations, and I hope you enjoyed. Have a good night, and thank you for joining us.